In this lecture, we are going to learn about discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is the second lecture in this series of lectures that we are delivering in the chapter discourse. In the first lecture, we learned about discourse and we defined a discourse as a form of language, spoken or written, that gives some meaning to the listeners or readers. When we speak, of course, we have some purpose in mind, and that purpose could be creating meanings in a particular context, or shaping a relationship with people, or influencing the society. So, discourse analysis is actually the study of how language works in a context to create meanings, shape relationships, or influence society. These are some three purposes that I have mentioned over here. There could be many. Let's try to understand the term discourse analysis through an example. Let's suppose a politician makes a statement as, "We must work together to build a stronger nation." This sentence could be the part of the discussion that he is having with somebody. From that discussion, we have taken this particular sentence. So this sentence is actually the part of the discussion between the politician and the person who is engaged in that conversation with the politician. So this could be termed as discourse. Why? This is the part of the discussion between the two persons. So after learning about discourse, that is any spoken or written language that gives meaning to the listeners or readers, we can further explain this particular example to understand discourse analysis. Now, we in the previous slide, we learned that the politicians saying, "We must work together to build a stronger nation," is discourse. Now let's try to analyze this discourse. Now we are analyzing it to understand how it creates unity, because the politician has said it. So of course it's for the unity. It may be for the unity. We are guessing it may be for the unity. It may be to persuade the listeners, as the politicians always try to persuade their listeners, or is reflecting some sort of political ideas. So this our analysis of the sentence of that politician, in which he may have these three purposes to deliver, to convey. So this analysis of the discourse is called discourse analysis. When a person analyzes a discourse as a discourse analyst, so he may have some questions in mind. For example, when he analyzes the discourse, the first thing he asks that who is the speaker or who is speaking. Why? The position of the speaker always affects the meaning and the impact of the statement. So if a politician says that particular sentence, the meaning would be different, impact would be different. If a teacher says that, so the meaning between the teacher saying and the politician saying would be entirely different, right? And the impact would also be different, right? For example, let me explain it this way, that if somebody, a common speaker, right, sitting somewhere with his friends, and he utters that we need to build a stronger nation. So what would be the effect of this person's saying? And a very well-known, famous politician, right, national, right, leader, if he says that, so both these sayings have different meanings and different impacts. Why? The speakers are different. So this is always important when analyzing any discourse. We need to know who is speaking. Next, a person who analyzes a discourse, he needs to see who is the intended audience. Again, if the common people are sitting in front of somebody and he utters this particular sentence, "We must work together to build a stronger nation." So it would be again different, right? But whenever a speaker speaks, he has to see who the audiences are. So the audiences, as per the audiences, people tailor their language. So after learning these two important things, discourse analyst has to see this thing as well, as what political or social context surround the statement. In a context, if political context, for example, that is not a common gathering in which a politician had said, it is, for example, the season of elections. So in the season of elections, we understand in that particular political context, so the statement would have different meanings. Why? The politicians, they have different intentions in order to gain their political mileage or want to get vote from their listeners, right? Or if somebody is sitting somewhere in a social context and says this statement, again the meaning would be different. So we need to know these sayings are actually do not carry the meaning. So what is important, actually the context around that particular statement helps explain the statement, why the statement is being made. Further, a discourse analyst has to ask himself when he is analyzing a particular discourse, that what ideas about nationality, security, identity are implied. Since we are studying a sentence or an utterance of a politician, so in that context, our fourth question is, of course, that is linked with nationality. Is it linked with nationality? Is the politician saying a particular sentence, right, about the nationality or about the security of the state or about the identity? What is implied there? When somebody makes an utterance, in that utterance, often there are assumptions that the politician or the people who make statements or in the utterances, they do not state these assumptions directly. They hide them. So they have some intentions in mind, and for those intentions they speak. So this has to be seen as well, that what sort of things are being implied in that particular utterance. Further, we need to see how different groups might interpret the statement differently. For example, if that is spoken to the students of a class who are young enough, they are not mature enough, so they would interpret it differently. They would say that, our politicians, they are, very good, and they are having a pain in their heart, they have sympathy for the people, right, whatever. So, but if this is spoken in front of, for example, religious students, again they would interpret it differently. When it comes to the people who are politically aware, they would interpret it differently. So people who come across any statement of any person, they would interpret things according to their experiences they have and the beliefs they have. So with their experiences and beliefs, they come to see a statement and then they interpret it. So what we have learned, right, together, that when we ask questions, for example, these 5 questions, if somebody asks, or the discourse analyst asks these questions, why is he asking? He is asking because whatever the statement is, the statement does not contain, right, the whole meaning of the language. So the meaning of the language is not contained only in the words themselves. So of course they are shaped, the statement is shaped by the speaker, by the audience, by the context, or by the social assumptions behind the message, which we have just understood in the previous slides. So all of these questions help answer a central question. What was the central question? That how does language create meaning, shape attitudes, influence people, and reflect social realities? This is the main question that we need to understand. For understanding this central question, we need to ask those 5 questions. When we asked ourselves those questions, when we are analyzing any text, so we can answer this central question, that how does language create meaning, shape attitudes, influence people, and reflect social realities? So what we learned, the crux of this whole discussion is that discourse analysis goes beyond what we said or investigates how. Means what we listen from people, we have to understand more than what is said. In other words, what is said is not all. We need to interpret and to try to understand, right, what motives, what particular motives are behind that particular saying. When we analyze all those things, asking ourselves those 5 questions, we can understand any discourse fully. So this whole study, this whole engagement, this whole investigation of discourse in order to get the right meaning is indeed called discourse analysis. So our discussion ends here. Again, I would like to ask you any of your queries regarding this particular lecture you have. You can text me, you can ask me, you can send me any voice message in our WhatsApp groups. There I'll be answering you all. Thank you very much.